is the Bearcast, presented by Bird Culchion Ford. Bird Culchion Ford has been in Waco since 1936. Ford is the #1 selling truck in Texas, 43 years running. The Bearcast is also presented by WellMed Medical Management and USMD Health System Dallas. Here's Craig Smoak and Grayson Grundhoefer.
And welcome into the Bearcast on this Tuesday, November 19th, 2024. I'm Craig Smoak, joined as always by Grayson Grundhoefer. Got Garrett Ross behind the scenes as well, and we are live, as we always are, Tuesdays at 11 a.m. on the Baylor Athletics on Sikkim 365 YouTube page, where if you are joining us there, either live or after the fact, we'd encourage you to please hit that like and subscribe button as we close in on 4,000 folks joining us regularly over on that page. But, of course, your favorite podcast platforms, you can find us there as well. So however you're listening this week or most weeks, we do appreciate it and just ask you for a little thumbs up and a follow, and that will do us all a world of good. But we are here to discuss the latest goings-on with Baylor football, which over the past couple of years has been a roller coaster, and this past month been a very smooth ride that's been a break in the ups and downs of this football program. In fact, smooth and just steadily accelerating and rising, an ascent that not many people expected ongoing right now in Waco as they've won their fourth straight game. Dave Aranda and company now with a big win to check another big old to-do off the to-do list, and that was going and winning in Morgantown, West Virginia this past weekend, which they did successfully, 49-35, the final score. And because of that, the Bears not only have won in West Virginia for the first time ever, but they have also clinched a bowl berth at now 6-4, and with 2 games to play, including this week at Houston, there is room for a 7th and 8th, and now possibly a 9th win as well. We'll get to all of that, but Grayson, a lot accomplished this weekend. Winning Morgantown, we've never seen that before. Getting bowl eligible, we haven't seen that in 2 years. Winning a 6th game just to put it in position of winning, like I said, 7, 8, 9 when all is said and done. What stands out to you about this past weekend, and how was it to see them go and beat West Virginia on Saturday?
First things first, they're bowl eligible, and that's what we talked about coming into the year. That's what they need to get to. I felt like it was really great that, pretty shortly after the game, you had Colt Barber on Sikkim 365 announcing that Dave Aranda would be returning for next season. So you get that accomplished. We know signing day is coming up the first week of December. So I think, again, that's huge for this program, right? Building momentum, building consistency. Recruits saw that. Very excited about that as well. And so, this performance, I think as we go through it, there were a lot of times where there were, bad plays, especially on defense, and times where you just kind of questioned, is this team going to be able to pull it off? But at the end of the day, this team ended up playing complementary football in the second half, whereas the first half obviously carried by the offense. They continue to hum. This is one of the best offenses in the country over the last month, over the last 4 games. They have been terrific. And Baylor gets another win to get to bowl eligibility and continue this momentum as we get towards the end of the season.
So we know that they are going to the postseason. It's just a matter now of what bowl game you can go and earn, and that will be aided by how many games you can win of these 2 that are remaining. As you know, jockey in the standings, you did make a move that I've documented a couple of times in a couple of different things that I do for the website and on the radio show as well, that, there's a lot that's being accomplished, but yeah, this has just been a remarkable ride, and now I'd lost my train of thought there. There's a point I was trying to make on their bowl eligibility, and now it slipped my mind.
They moved up the Big 12 standings.
Oh, yeah, they moved up the Big 12 standings. Yeah, I mentioned that they're now like in 5th in the Big 12 standings, hopped over Texas Tech, hopped over TCU, now hopped over West Virginia as well. Now, that could all change in 1 week. They could all win, you lose, and then you're now behind them once again, but doesn't feel like that's what's probably going to happen with this team because of the way they're playing right now. So really impressive win on Saturday. But before we get to it, you mentioned the Dave Aranda news. He is back for another year officially. Now, based on everything that I'd heard, that was happening pretty much regardless. Like, just financially, they're kind of, with the contract they have, with the state of the unknowns, with the court cases ongoing across the country, you don't know how much money is even available moving forward. So financially, I think every school in the country is having to make decisions now that are different than they had to make. So I think that was already working in his favor. But had you gone 0-12, then they would have found the money. They would have found, there would have been no excuses. He had to go out and earn this, and they have. So what are your thoughts on getting to a point now where the school felt comfortable saying, hey, this is going to continue? And also, what do you think that meant for recruits and whoever else has had any doubts about the future of the program? What do you think this all means the last couple of days with having that information official?
I mean, we mentioned it ad nauseum, just the simple fact that, if Baylor got to a bowl game, they were going to bring back Dave Aranda. That was said all offseason. They got there and then immediately made the announcement. I think that's really good on Baylor Athletics. I think that's a great look for the program. Again, for recruiting purposes, it's more about timing, right? Because if you drag this out to the end of the year and there's still uncertainty there, that can be a little bit of one of those deciding factors that maybe makes you decide to go somewhere else. And so Baylor doesn't have to deal with that anymore. The recruits know the head coach is coming back, which in turn they know that their position coach is likely coming back and things like that as well. So I think that put them in a great spot. But in general, I just think you get to a bowl game, you continue this momentum. Dave Aranda is back. I just think this is good for the health of the program and kind of where they're at now. And for them to go on the road, get their first ever win in West Virginia to accomplish getting to bowl eligibility is huge. And this checklist that they're just checking off this year has been fantastic. It's been a heck of a ride, a complete shift from what we saw a year ago, and now they're in a great position to finish this season even more successful. The 8 wins is on the table, and truthfully, I'm not necessarily going to say that should be the expectation, but I actually think it's becoming more and more likely that 8-4 is the most likely scenario to end this season.
I've been saying for the past couple of weeks, if they win this game, I feel good about them winning out. And so I feel great about them winning out now because they've gone and won a couple of games that I didn't necessarily expect them to, or felt like if they did, then that's really a positive sign towards them being able to maybe go full-on sweep out the rest of the regular season. And so here we are with 2 games to play, and they've won 4 in a row now, and definitely have the possibility and are favored to win 5. And then we'll see with Kansas, because that's one of the hotter teams in the country, but so is Baylor. So there's a chance, especially if Kansas beats Colorado this weekend, that you could have 2 of the hottest teams in the country playing. But as we saw with Houston last year, and as many teams have seen with Houston this year, you can't overlook them. Because ask Oklahoma, ask Kansas State. I mean, they've jumped up and had some nice wins despite having some struggles. And TCU, another team that's a part of that as well. So that's to come here in a couple of weeks. But let's get to what is going on right now. Or not a couple weeks for Houston. That's this weekend. But the next couple weeks will determine 7 wins, 8 wins, and obviously a bowl game as well. But it definitely feels like the possibility is there for a second-half sweep. That's the point. And so how did we get here? Well, with the win over West Virginia is how we got to this most recent point. Baylor now 6-4, 4-3 with the 49-35 victory on Saturday. And West Virginia now 5-5 and 4-3 in the Big 12. And, man, they are not happy in Morgantown. They are not announcing another year for Neil Brown just yet. We'll see how that goes for them, but definitely a tough loss for them on Saturday and a great win for the Bears. So let's just dive right into it and get into the details. A game that started off with a couple of pretty nice scripted drives from both teams, just their offenses out from the outset, driving down the field and able to put up opening scores. So we started off 7-7 after West Virginia had a Big 12-play 79-yard drive. I mean, get off the field. But instead, Baylor defense, and a sign of things to come, and especially in this first half for both defenses, they gave up the Garrett Green rushing touchdown. We mentioned this last week. We talked about injuries. I felt like Garrett Green, what they were saying about him, I felt he had a really good chance to play. He played. He started and played the whole game. Also, Hudson Clement, who's so hurt, he played. So, again, the injury games that the teams play, there was a couple of guys back for West Virginia, and it mattered, especially here early on. Garrett Green drives them down the field. Touchdown, it's 7-0, and That's how we got the party started in Morgantown with the long drive from the Mountaineers.
Right, and he's so much better than Nico Markiel. I still can't believe that West Virginia fans have been just saying that Nico needed to be the guy the rest of the way. I think if Nico plays in this game, it might have gotten really ugly. I mean, Baylor ends up winning by 2 scores, but I think if Nico plays, this might have been a 24, maybe even a 30-point win, I think, for Baylor, because Garrett Green's legs really kept them in this game. Saw it a little bit on this drive. We're going to talk about it a lot as we go forward. Hit over 100 yards rushing in the first half. So that was really huge for them. And we mentioned this last week. If he played, we felt like this could be a higher scoring game. I mean, that's kind of exactly what it led to.
Yeah, it did. This was a shootout in the first half. Baylor would respond on their opening drive. 7 plays, 75 yards. Sawyer Robertson throwing it around a bit. Bryson Washington also getting some early carries. And eventually it was Sawyer Robertson to Bryson Washington. He would have another monster game. Robertson would as well. Those two guys are amongst 2 of the hottest players in the country right now, statistically, putting up big numbers every week. And it was Robertson to Washington, 22 yards, as Bryson shows you that he doesn't need to just get handoffs out of the backfield. He can also be a threat in the passing game, which is not good news for opposing defenses because you've already got quite a few things to worry about. And you can have Robertson run on occasion, plus throw the ball as well as he has, plus the running game's doing what it's doing. And now Bryson Washington's out catching passes, and we know Pendergrass can do that as well. And it's just you've got receivers who are actually making plays. It's a beautiful thing, and the offense keeps rolling here and will for most of the afternoon. Touchdown at 7-7 Bears after the Washington score, which would be the first of 4 for him on the day.
That was a pretty incredible touchdown as well. Sawyer Robertson double clutched and still ended up throwing just a perfect ball to Bryson and a great catch. I mean, for a running back to make a catch like that is really, really impressive. They get the touchdown. I think it was also pass interference as well, which was called quite a bit on Baylor, but not so much on West Virginia during this game. But a great throw by Sawyer, great touchdown by Bryson, and yeah, that gets the game going. I did want to mention, Josh Cameron had a 23-yard reception on 3rd down on this drive. You mentioned Bryson and Sawyer, who have been extremely hot recently. Josh Cameron as well is kind of in that group. He had another 100-yard game in this one and continues to be the unquestioned leader in the wide receiver room this year.
West Virginia would go 3 and out. Baylor gets the ball back, and now we can talk about Josh Cameron a little bit more because he would score on this drive. Just 6 plays, 80 yards. And it was Robertson and Washington. You got Ashton Hawkins opening the drive up as well and having a couple catches that eventually led to Josh Cameron with a 43-yard touchdown, which is a prime example of some of the things I talked about when they've struggled offensively. He made the catch. That's a nice starting point because not everybody was even doing that there for a little while. But then he made the move after the catch, and he actually turned a catch. That's just a nice gain into a touchdown. He went out and made a play, and yes, he is one of their playmakers, and he and Washington and Robertson, the Uns, have all made a really big impact and have kind of become the three-headed monster for this team over the last month or so. But yes, Josh Cameron, big catch and run after the catch, 43 yards. It's 14-7, and Baylor making it clear pretty early that the offense is feeling good, and also that they're here to party in Morgantown and try and get this first win, of which we know they eventually will, but a long way to get there.
For the last 2 years, Baylor receivers on that very play, Craig, that is probably a 10-yard gain and a first down. But Josh made a guy miss and actually went and scored a touchdown. But that had been, a huge problem outside of Monterey Baldwin. And Monterey has had issues with drops. We saw it again in this game. But one thing he has done over the last 2 years is at least create yak. This year, Josh Cameron has taken a massive step in the right direction. In that regard, I think a lot of it is, you see it in flashes on punt returns as well, right? The ability to make guys miss, he did on this play as well. And I think that's been really big for Baylor's wide receiver core because not a lot of these guys are really making guys miss still in the open field, but Josh is.
Yeah, he is. So a big score for him, and he continues to have a banner all Big 12 type of year when you include his punt return statistics as well. So it's 14-7. Another freaking 12-play drive where the defense is not able to get off the field. And part of the reason why is you had like 3 penalties on this drive alone on your defense. Had an offsides on Corey Gordon Jr. on 3rd and 7. That makes it a 3rd and 2. Of course, West Virginia converts that with C.J. Donaldson. Then a few plays later, as we get into the second quarter, 3rd down and 2, you get a holding Lorando Johnson, automatic first down. So the second penalty that has hurt you on this drive, and this one actually for a first down. Then 3rd and 9, another penalty as Caden Jenkins gets called for pass interference. So 3 penalties on this drive, 2 on 3rd downs that have turned them into first downs. Hey, imagine that West Virginia scores in this drive. I mean, why not? You've given them like 45 yards in free yards and a couple of extra first downs. But ultimately, Garrett Green with a 9-yard touchdown pass to Traylon Ray, who had a nice game going and then gets hurt there at the end. That was really tough to see later in the ball game that Caden Jenkins lands on him and clearly broke something, and it was all bad. But here, it was all good. Traylon Ray, touchdown. It's 14-14. And, just you can't have all these penalties. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, his foot was sideways, and we'll get to that play. That was really, really hard to watch. But, yeah, on this drive, I mean, the Lorando holding call was definitely holding. That was definitely a call that had to be made. You know, this Caden Jenkins one, and he had, I think, 3 in this game. This one was very questionable. I mean, again, you could call this kind of foul on basically every single play. And so you call it here on 3rd and 9 in a very crucial time. Baylor's about to get off field. You know, West Virginia's probably going to punt in this situation because it's still a close game. It's only 14-7 at the moment. 3rd and 9, you basically get a stop and they throw this penalty, and obviously West Virginia capitalizes. But yeah, it's tough to see because a few of these drives really do skew the numbers for West Virginia because it's just Baylor giving them penalty yardage and then allowing them to score a touchdown. You see it at the very end of the game as well.
So 14-14, Baylor goes 3 and out and had a 4th and 1, but a false start leads to a 4th and 6. So, hey, another penalty. As they now have to punt the ball rather than go for it on 4th down and 1. So, you know, maybe they don't do that. It was on their side of the field, but regardless, the decision was taken out of their hands once it became 4th and 6. So, penalties were an issue in this game. West Virginia gets the ball back, could go take the lead, but they go for it on 4th and 5 as they've driven down to the Baylor 35-yard line. And being aggressive costs them as Garrett Green throws incomplete in Baylor territory and turns the ball over. So a nice stop for the defense, of which they'd have many on the day. For as bad as they were in spots, they were also really good in spots. So it's like you take what you can get. Luckily the offense had a nice outburst, so you're not going to be able to make some of the mistakes they made. But, I mean, they played really well in the second half, but did get one big stop in the first half here with the turnover on downs.
Right, and this one was the drop by West Virginia where he's wide open. I think it was Robinson, and he just drops it across the middle of the field. You get lucky here. Now, I will say that was a big play. We'll get to one in a little bit. Monterey also dropped a first down, so I feel like those two kind of evened out a little bit because both killed a drive for both teams.
Baylor takes the lead, 5-play, 65-yard drive after the stop. Dawson Pendergrass with a few runs after the Michael Trigg completion, and then eventually it's Monterey Baldwin, 40-yard touchdown as Monterey's just kind of the big play guy that can sprinkle in, some excitement, and certainly does here. 21-14 as he gets on the board with a big explosive play.
He doesn't get the ball a ton, and I think part of it is route running. Part of it is just those contested catches across the middle of the field aren't his forte, but he adds so much explosiveness to this offense. And this was, he was open. This was also a great throw by Sora Robertson in between the cornerback and the safety. Monterey torched his man. He did get open. It was a good ball. So nice to see that. Monterey has been kind of feels like quiet and somewhat underutilized at times, but also it's like when he is on the field, he's creating explosive plays. So in some regards, it feels like he's being used properly.
Baylor gets the lead. They also get a 3 and out as West Virginia unsuccessfully runs the ball 3 straight times and is forced to punt. Bears then go up 2 scores. Quick drive as Bryson Washington strikes again, 51-yard touchdown run. Another big explosive play for the offense, and this starts a bit of a shootout to end the first half of play. But the Bears do briefly go up 2 scores, and kind of writing on the wall here a little bit, but it would take them a little while longer to pull away. But you felt good about their chances if they could get stops on defense. Problem is they're just not going to get any for a while on defense. But this was another big Bryson Washington moment.
It was, and this was the moment where Baylor started being able to run the football. They kind of had been inconsistent in the first half running the ball. Now they were having tons of success throwing it, so you're kind of picking and choosing there. But from this moment on, Baylor really controlled the front and were able to run the ball efficiently and effectively. On this run, Bryson Washington actually became, according to RA Analytics, the fastest player in college football during this week of college football. So really nice to see that. He's got great acceleration, great burst, and we're continuing to see that. I mean, he's not really getting caught from behind ever, and that's really impressive for a guy at his size.
West Virginia responds, 3 plays, 41 yards. Garrett Green with a nice run, and then eventually it's C.J. Donaldson set up a great field position here, starting off at the Baylor 41-yard line. It just took them 3 plays to take advantage of said field position as they make it a 1-score game and keep hope alive that this is not just going to be ran away with, even though when Baylor got up 2 scores, you had a pretty good feeling about what you were going to see from the Bears on this day. But West Virginia is saying, like, not so fast. We're going to at least make this interesting here for a little while, and they respond quickly. And it's 28-21 in Morgantown as the natives get a little bit of ray of hope here.
And this was one of the more controversial moments of the game as far as, people giving being hard on Dave Aranda for decision-making, I guess. They decide to kick the onside kick in this moment after scoring that touchdown by Bryson Washington to go up by 14. I think in hindsight, you could say, oh, why would you ever do that? But I also think Dave Aranda pretty much knew they weren't getting stops. And I think the overall goal here was you kick it short, hope you get it. They actually had a good chance to get it. Devin Lemire went right over his head. It felt like if he had been closer to the sideline, he might have been able to come down with it. But in general, you're unable to get it. But then you're like, okay, West Virginia may score. They may score quickly, but we'll get the ball back with the opportunity to go score points, take a 14-point lead, and then get the ball to start the second half. Some things happen, obviously, that kind of ruin that strategy. But in general, I didn't hate the call. I know it gives West Virginia a touchdown, but I think Baylor felt pretty good that they were going to be able to get the ball back and potentially score again before half.
It was a gutsy call. He's being aggressive. Didn't pay off. If it would have, he'd be called a genius. We know how that goes. It's a 50-50 decision. In the end, didn't really matter because they end up winning the game. But certainly if they had lost, that's a moment you point to and you go, well, part of the reason they lost because Aranda gave them field position with the dumb onside kick. But it didn't work, and yet we don't care because it didn't matter in the end result. And I kind of appreciate the aggressiveness and knowing, hey, we've never won here. Let's go, do some things to put this game away as quickly as we possibly can. So West Virginia said thank you, and then they turned that into a quick touchdown. So it definitely did not look like a good call at the time. But you saw the point of it because the offense gets back out there and 7 plays, 55 yards, another touchdown to open it back up to 2 scores. Sawyer Robertson throwing the ball around here to a complement of wide receivers, and then Bryson Washington finishing it off, his 3rd touchdown in the first half, and it's an 8-yard score. It is 35-21. At this point, I'm realizing I lowballed the prediction because there's just a lot of points being scored, and we are not even at halftime yet.
Right, and this was the moment where right when Bryson scored, I looked at the clock and was like, this is too much time. They're going to, it felt inevitable that West Virginia was going to score something. Now, we'll get to that moment because they might not have, but it just felt inevitable at this point. You're kind of like, I hope Baylor scores with 15 seconds left. Instead, there's 47 seconds left. A very efficient drive. 7 plays in 52 seconds. They were just up and down the field all first half. And Sawyer Robertson looked tremendous. He had 260 passing yards and 3 touchdowns in just the first half alone.
So it's 35-21, 47 seconds left. Certainly you can get a stop and just go into the locker room and feel like you're in full control of this game. But West Virginia had other ideas. On 3rd and 17, another banner moment for the defense, and yes, that is sarcasm that you sense, as Hudson Clement picks up the 44-yard reception to give them a first down. A couple more first downs, and next thing you know, they're down there near the goal line, and less than a minute's time, so exactly what you didn't want. But you did leave a bit of time on the clock, so that was the risk that you ran. And sure enough, there with just seconds remaining, Garrett Green plunges, air quotes, into the end zone. Actually, he never even crosses the goal line, it looks like. But despite that, despite technology, despite the ability to review, despite all of these things, somehow they don't have a pylon cam or what is needed to actually see what happened. And so the officials reward Garrett Green with a touchdown. And I think what we saw said otherwise, but indisputable proof and all those types of things. I mean, whatever. This was just a bad call at the end of the half, as it didn't look like Garrett Green got in the end zone. They give him the touchdown. Can't change it. Boom, touchdown, West Virginia. It's a big score right before the half to pull it back in to a one-score game, and that's obviously a huge deal because Baylor was going to get the ball to start the second half, so you look at like being down 2 touchdowns and this offense that you haven't stopped at all. So this was critical to West Virginia feeling like they were still in this game heading into the halftime locker room.
Yeah, the first moment here, Jackie Marshall getting that sack, and then they force an incompletion. It's 3rd and 17. You can't give up a 44-yard play. And this was over Caden Jenkins' head to Hudson Clement. Really good catch, but he was open. I mean, you're letting the receiver get over the top of you on a 3rd and 17. Like, you can't allow that to happen. And so a huge play there, and one that really should not be happening. Like, that's a really tough conversion point, and they give up 44 yards on it. But you're exactly right. The touchdown, for them to not have the technology, like we have all this technology now in sports, in the NFL, even in college football in some regards, for them to not have an angle at all that gives them any sort of look at the goal line is crazy. Like, they're showing all the review points, and I'm like, they can't overturn this. There's nothing they can do to overturn this. You got views from behind the quarterback. Like, that's not going to tell you anything about where the football is. What I can tell you is his feet were in the end zone, but the ball was in his left hand. And if it would have been in his right hand, it's probably a touchdown. But I think since it was in his left hand, it wasn't. But it is what it is. And also the huge part about this is the time ran out. So they weren't going to get a field goal. They weren't going to get another chance at this. It would have been a 14-point lead for Baylor. It was a huge call.
Yeah, it was a terrible break. It was a bad call based on what we had in front of us. But that is life in college football with officials, and a bad break. And so maybe old Baylor teams go sulk into the locker room. They let this affect them, and it certainly felt like that with the way the second half would start. But they take a lead into halftime, and you felt good about their chances. You also felt like they were kind of letting stuff linger. Not entirely their fault. Like, they didn't really give up that touchdown, but a game where they were kind of cruising offensively, you're only up by 7 at halftime. You're like, well, damn, should feel like more. But they do get the ball to start the second half, and after driving down the field, Sawyer Robertson throwing the ball around pretty successfully once again. A big penalty on 3rd down and 8. Holding call takes a 3rd down and 8 into a 3rd down and 18, and you get a small pickup back, Ashton Hawkins for like 8 yards, but it forces a field goal attempt, and Isaiah Hankins misses from 55 yards, and I'm going, all right, here we go. Gave up the touchdown. It's one-score game. Get the ball to start the second half. Penalty, field goal, missed the field goal. It's still a 7-point game after all that. Luckily, that feeling would subside in a little bit of time. It wasn't the next few minutes. It was a little while than that, but still, things would turn rosy once again. But in this moment, you're thinking, all right, this is exactly how you're going to try to go lose in Morgantown again. Right,
and Baylor got quite a few unfavorable calls, I felt like, in big situations. But this one was a clear holding on Keytron Jackson on the outside there. He definitely held to give Bryson Washington the opportunity to get a first down. So unfortunate call, but the right call. And then also, 4th and 12, it's interesting. I think a lot of people would have wanted them to go for it just because the field goal kicking had been so bad.
At this point, you probably should start to. I mean,
right.
Honestly. But you also have a defense that you're not all that sold on.
Yeah. So. You have options here, though. You could have gone for it. You could have punted it. You got a great punter. You feel pretty good. You might down him inside the 10. So there were some options here. I think going forward, 55 yards, that's a long field goal. I know kickers, most of them will say you should make that, but I think with Hankins' struggles this year, I think it's pretty tough to ask him to go out there and make that kick at this point in the season.
Yeah, I don't think he's made a 50-yarder this year, has he?
I think he did.
Air Force. So he's 1 for 2 from 50. He's 2 from 4 from 40 to 49. So yeah, I mean it's definitely not a sure thing. It's a coin flip basically. So yeah, I could see trying to pin and then yet going, well, what's the matter? They're going to drive 90 yards with the way our defense is playing. So I mean you're flipping a coin basically in that situation. It was a tough one to be in, but Hankins misses. Fortunately, doesn't matter. West Virginia doesn't do anything with the ball. They ended up punting on their following drive as Matt Jones had a big sack on that one to push them back, as well as a false start penalty. So 3rd and long, they can't convert. They punt. Baylor gets the ball back. They punt, had another big holding call on this drive. So, again, penalties were a bugaboo. I didn't mention them in my good, bad, ugly because at some point I got to stop mentioning every single thing. It becomes just so long as I try to hit the high points. But I thought about it at the time, and I just was like, whatever. But I probably could have put penalties in the bad.
Yeah, it was bad.
Yeah, it was bad, but just moved on from it. But it definitely, in reliving all this, was not a good look for them on Saturday.
Now, it wasn't 2014 bad. If you remember that one, they had, 225 yards of penalties, but it was pretty bad.
Yeah, so they get the penalty here. Sawyer Robertson gets sacked a couple plays later. They're forced to punt. West Virginia gets the ball, and this is where the defense would really step up. They get a turnover on downs as West Virginia, after a big pass interference call on Caden Jenkins, another penalty, as we were just talking about. They get the ball all the way down to the Baylor 9-yard line, 4th and 2, and they go towards their big tight end, Cole Taylor, incomplete. Turnover on downs at the Baylor 9-yard line in a 7-point game. So a pretty critical stop for the Baylor defense technically here, although a little bit of luck as well. But regardless, they needed to stop. They got to stop, and this is a sequence where the offense is suddenly bogged down, and they're hanging on to a 1-score lead, and you're just wondering which direction they're going to take in this fork in the road. Are they going to pull away, or are they going to let this thing remain close on the road and give this game away at the end? That was what I was wondering during this entire stretch of this part of the game. So big turnover on downs, and we're about to get into more of that.
Players making plays. This 4th and 2, all about Matt Jones on the blitz. He created the pressure, forced Garrett Green to be off balance, thrown off his back foot while getting hit. He throws it short to Cole Taylor, which keeps him short of the first down. I mean, it was a big play. And I felt like Matt Jones struggled in the first half, but in the second half, he made big play after big play for this defense, which is basically what he's done all year long. It was impressive, and this play was a big moment. Also a good call by Dave Aranda, bringing him on the blitz. And I think there was some of that in the second half as well with this defense, some good calls.
So they get the 4th down stop. Surely they're going to go open this lead up. Nope, they're going to punt again. And again, just let this sort of linger as they give it back to West Virginia after 6-play drive. Doesn't go anywhere, and they can't convert on 3rd down and 4, so they give the ball back. And West Virginia, again, turns it over on downs. 7 plays. They get all the way down to the Baylor 35-yard line, and on 3rd and 6 at the 35, Garrett Green incomplete. This was following another penalty on the Baylor defense, an offsides penalty. So they throw complete following the offsides. It's 4th and 6. They go for it and throw incomplete once again. Another stop on downs for the Baylor defense, the 2nd in a row. And so this is where the floodgates are about to open as the offense will finally get back to business. But another huge stop, and West Virginia just hating life at this moment because how could you not? I mean, there's this 1-score game, and you've now turned the ball over on downs for the 2nd straight time after your defense finally got a couple of stops itself. You cannot capitalize, and it will come back to haunt them in very short order.
So on the last drive, they bring Matt Jones on the blitz. He creates the play that leads to the incompletion on 4th down. This time, Dave Aranda dials up him dropping back into coverage right where Garrett Green's trying to throw the football. Matt Jones breaks up the pass. Again, a player making a big play, and Matt has done it all year long. These 2 back-to-back drives, him making those plays, might have won Baylor this game, or at least given them the opportunity to now open things up because they're finally getting stops on defense.
Yep, so here's where the game just goes the way of the Bears. After getting the second fourth down stop, 10 plays, 65 yards, they opened it back up to a 2-score lead, and at this point, you feel like even with 10-plus minutes left or whatever it was by the end of this drive, a little under 10 minutes, they just needed a 14-point lead, and you were going to feel pretty great about things. Still needed another icer, but big, long drive here. Sawyer Robertson, Bryson Washington, they feature as usual. Had a big pass interference call as well on Hal Presley, or not on Hal Presley, but on Mikey Preston, who was covering Hal Presley. That gave you a big first down conversion. Had another one later on as Robertson hits Ashton Hawkins on 3rd and 6 to move the chains, and then Bryson Washington, after that Hawkins reception, 3 carries, closes the drive on out from the 24 down to the 16, down to the 9, down to the end zone. It is a 42-28 for the Bears, 42-28 lead for the Bears.
Clear pass interference on that throw to Hal Presley, just like the one I mentioned earlier on Caden Jenkins. That was the right call in this situation. Grabbed him at the hips, didn't allow him to make a play on the ball. That was a big call. Sawyer, obviously, on that 3rd down to Ashton was big. And then this is where, Bryson, again, just running, the offensive line really controlling things up front. Get a touchdown. Yeah, you're exactly right. This felt like, okay, now Baylor's in control of this game, especially the way the defense was playing.
So West Virginia, with a kind of few minutes still remaining and a little bit of breath of hope if they can go down and score, does the exact opposite of that. Garrett Green gets picked off by Corey Gordon Jr., and that basically seals this bad boy on up. Not fully, but it basically was. I mean, you're up 2 scores. There's 7 minutes left. You just picked the ball off, and your offense is about to go and take it and cram it down West Virginia's throat again to basically seal this thing. So this was a huge nail in the coffin that you needed from your defense to go ahead and put this thing away. Again, another player making a play. I think they've got a good coaching staff. I think ultimately college football comes down to your players making plays, and so long as you have great coaching, and Baylor does. But this whole turnaround has been guys, Matt Jones, whoever, making plays. And Corey Gordon does here on a day that, had its ups and downs for the defense, but they go ahead and seal it. And there would still be a couple more scores, but this thing was over at this point. So it was huge.
Finally got the turnover they needed. We didn't mention it early on, but Devin Bobby had a surefire interception in the end zone. It goes through his hands, ends up being a touchdown for West Virginia.
That's like a weekly feature for this defense at this point since Colorado.
Yeah, you got to make plays. You're put in that position, right? Like Dave Aranda puts you in the position where you get an interception, drops it, leads to a West Virginia touchdown. In this situation, Corey Gordon made the play, got the interception. He had a spot start today at the start, or in this game at the star position, because we found out after the game that Carl Williams has torn his meniscus, will be out at least until the bowl game. So it seems like Corey is going to be the full-time star now for this defense. Still waiting to see if Kendrick Simpkins is going to come back at all, as well as he's been out for a while. Corey had an up-and-down game, but this was definitely the biggest highlight at a huge moment. So kudos to him to make a huge play at this time of the game.
So it was pretty much over here, but they would go ahead and put the exclamation point because there was a good bit of time remaining, so you kind of had to go and put it away. So they would. 8 plays, 47 yards, and Dawson Pendergrass basically playing the closer role here. It had been a lot of Bryson Washington, but Pendergrass basically takes nearly this entire drive by himself, save for a couple of Sawyer Robertson throws, but he caps off what was a very busy drive. Pendergrass, 15-yard touchdown on 4th down and 2. They roll the dice. And, look, you're down to the West Virginia 15. You're up 2 scores. Why the hell not put this thing away? It's part of the killer instinct that they did not have at the beginning of the year. And he not only picks up the first down, but he turns it into a touchdown. And that's, like, exactly what they have not had for 2 years that they now have again, was that just, like, we're going to finish this thing. We're going to finish. We're going to be finishers. And that's why they've won 4 straight games in part. So, yeah, Dawson Pendergrass with a big exclamation point, and it's 49-28. And there's one more series to go, but we'll get to that in just a moment.
Yeah, heck of a drive, heck of a way to finish it. Dawson's done that a couple times this year, so great to see him come in with fresh legs and really just kind of put this game away. Again, the offensive line just dominating. I mean, by this point in the game, they'd kind of broken West Virginia's defensive front. Very impressive performance by Baylor on the ground in this game. We'll talk about it at the end here, but I felt like this was their biggest challenge they've had during this run, and they really stepped up to that challenge on the road.
So then the one thing you didn't want to see was giving up a touchdown at the end because you want to finish, you want to get a shutout in the second half, but that would not be the case. West Virginia, with their third 10-play-plus touchdown drive in this game, 15 plays, 75 yards, lipstick on a pig, but a couple of big third-down conversions, fourth down conversion, as you got a 15-yard pickup on 4th and 10, and then eventually Garrett Green, after a couple passes, gets sacked by Trevin Maye, throws a couple incompletions, and then eventually hits Cole Taylor, blah, 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 4th and goal at the Baylor 11, and so they get their touchdown there at the end to make it 49-35, and that would be your final, as West Virginia does get the little bit of a moment there at the end. I know Aranda wasn't happy about that, nor was the defense for that matter, nor should they be, but that was a little bit frustrating. And what was otherwise a banner day, 49-35, Bears win, and they have now won 4 in a row. They're 6-4, they're 4-3 in the Big 12, and they've won in Morgantown for the first time ever, so we don't have to bring that up ever again. When they go back to visit, they will always have this win now in the record books, and so that was pretty cool to see, and a great victory. A lot of highlights, a few lowlights, but feel pretty good about what we saw against the Mountaineers.
Definitely, and I mean, for Baylor on that last drive, that touchdown, they went 29 minutes without giving up a point in the second half. They were doing so well. They were about to pitch a shutout, and then West Virginia scores a meaningless garbage time touchdown. Texas Tech scored 2 of them in their game against Baylor. That's 21 points that were essentially in garbage time that I do think skew some of the defensive numbers. Not all of them. Obviously, the first half was atrocious, but I do think when you're adding 21 points to a sample size, of 10 games, that's a lot of points. I mean, that's 2 full points added to your score tally there. So I felt like the defense really made the adjustments at halftime and really played a very complete second half aside from that last touchdown. Outside of that, Sora Robertson, 329 yards, 3 touchdowns. He continues to be a top 6 quarterback per QBR this year, along with names like Jackson Dart, Dylan Gabriel, Jalen Milroe. It's been awesome to see. He's really ascended into this top level of quarterbacks in the country, and this offense is operating at a very, very high level because of that. The running game, Bryson Washington, 4 more touchdowns in this game. Had over 180 total yards of offense. He is turning into a workhorse running back and a difference maker for them. And then Josh Cameron, 5 catches for 101 yards and a touchdown. Really impressive day by their playmakers. They really stepped up once again and allowed them to get this win in Morgantown. And like I said, the run game was the key thing I was going to watch. Well, 183 yards on 34 carries is absolutely getting the job done against what was supposed to be a top 4 run defense in the Big 12.
Yes, and the defense obviously had their moments where it wasn't so great. Dave Aranda even saying, particularly about the secondary, kind of it is what it is. I mean, we can't go and get new players to come and replenish this thing. It is just going to be what it's going to be, and sometimes it's going to be good, and sometimes it's not going to be so good. But you did have the big interception from Corey Gordon that helped put this thing away. Had 8 tackles for loss, had 4 sacks. So there were some good things, but had a few drives get away from them. But regardless, a nice win, 49-35. So now 4 in a row, going bowling. All that's big time. But now time for the Texas sweep, potentially. You've beaten TCU. You've beaten Texas Tech. And you've also beaten is that just it? Oh, yeah. And now you have the chance to beat Houston and go for the 3-0 sweep, of which the only Texas sweep that's possible nowadays. You don't play A&M, you don't play Texas.
They got Tarleton as well.
Yeah, I don't count that. But if you wanted to start including Texas States and everybody else, nobody plays a full schedule. But all the Texas schools don't even play all 3 of the other Texas schools. Baylor does. That's a unique feature to this schedule, and so they do have the opportunity to sweep the Big 12 Texas schools, which would be a pretty cool deal. And I'm sure also want to get a little measure of revenge from last year and the horrific loss at home in overtime to Houston that even amidst a season that had a lot of bad moments, just felt like another low point, quite frankly, last year when Houston rolled into McLean Stadium and picked up that win in their first year in the Big 12. So I'm sure that's lingering somewhat for some involved, but you don't even need that really as motivation. How about the fact that Houston's taken Oklahoma to the limits, even though I know it's not the Oklahoma of old, but still, that was impressive to see for a team that we didn't expect anything out of in Houston. They've also beaten TCU in Fort Worth. They beat Utah, which I know, but still, if you told Houston fans before the beginning of the year they beat Utah, they'd have been out of their minds, much less beating TCU in Fort Worth, much less taking Oklahoma to the limits, much less than beating Kansas State. So 3 Big 12 wins over TCU, Utah, and Kansas State. You certainly wouldn't have predicted at the beginning of the year, but most recently they did drop their latest to go back to under 500 in the Big 12, losing to Houston Arizona last week in Tucson, 27-3. Last we saw them, the offense, which has really been sputtery all year long. They rely on pretty much a big play here and there, whether it's special teams with Mekhi Muse getting them great field position or just a big explosive, or it's Zion Chris just finding a couple of ways to score a touchdown, or even Donovan Smith on a short yardage. They have a really good defense, and they basically rely on that, and then they rely on the offense doing like a couple things and winning a relatively low-scoring game. That's their winning formula. They couldn't do that last week because the offense couldn't do anything, and the defense wasn't even particularly good. So last we saw, not their best look, but they've certainly done enough this season to not take them for granted.
Right. You can't take them for granted. They've won a few games. If they get you into an ugly contest, they can beat you. And I think that's kind of been the area where you look through their schedule. It's like if you're not pulling away from them, if you're allowing them to play a, 21-17 type game, a 17-14 type game, you're probably going to be in trouble. And the game's probably going to go a little sideways. And that's kind of how it's been throughout the year for them. They've been blown out more than a couple times. UNLV beat them 27-7, Cincy 34-0, Iowa State 20-0, and Kansas 42-14, and then of course Arizona 27-3. So they have been routed, and the key is if you can force them to play from behind, they are not comfortable with that. And that's where turnovers can start happening, and that's where they really get exposed, because really what they want to do is just run the football, waste the time, give their defense a rest, and then allow their defense to get more stops on the other end. But if you force them to have to throw it a bunch, that's where they are in real danger of getting blown out. And it's happened again, 4 times this year, or 5 times this year?
Lost by 20 to UNLV, lost 34-0 to Cincinnati, lost 20-0 to Iowa State, lost 42-14 to Kansas, lost 27-3 to Arizona. So
5 blowout losses.
Yeah,
on the schedule. And I think that really speaks to, you look at the teams that they've lost to, aside from Arizona, those are some of the more balanced offenses that they've had to play. Teams that can run the ball efficiently and throw the ball efficiently. They had a lot of success against TCU. This was before TCU started running Savion Williams more. I think that changed their offense completely, because they went from not being able to run the ball at all to at least having some semblance of a rushing attack. And so I think that was kind of the key in that one. But aside from that, you look at these other offenses, Kansas, Cincinnati, Iowa State, UNLV, those are balanced offenses. And they had some success, throwing the football or running the football on Houston. And I think that is the one thing that I look at and go, okay, so all those offenses did a pretty good job. Are any of those offenses better than how Baylor's offense is operating right now? My answer to that would be no. And so that gives me a clear blueprint as to, how Baylor can be successful and how Baylor should honestly be successful in this game, despite the fact that Houston does have a pretty much in every category a top 5 defense.
Yeah, they have a very good defense. The offense is incredibly shaky. They've thrown 12 interceptions. Donovan Smith threw a lot of those earlier in the year. They benched him, went to Zion Chris. He'll turn the ball over as well, though. Not particularly great throwing the ball. They can hit you in the run game. But I think, this is a game where, Baylor's offense feels like it's the sort of ace card that tips the scales in their favor. And the fact that Houston's not really consistent offensively gives you hope the defense can get enough stops to give the offense, enough to give you that balanced effort that you need to go down into enemy territory and win this game. I like Baylor in this game, but I do know that, if you let this linger like you almost did against West Virginia, or you allow it to be a low-scoring game, if the offense turns it over or, lets this little ray of hope sort of dance for Houston and let them have some belief, then you'll create some danger for yourself. But it also is a game where I feel like if you play the way you've been playing of late, you should go down there and you should win pretty handily, in my opinion. But it's a matter of what team shows up for the Bears on Saturday, and that's a wild card you never really know. But right now they do seem to be in a pretty good groove. So what about Houston stands out? Because I think we hit the high points on them, but before we get into the mailbag and all of that, what do you kind of want to hit on as far as they go?
So Dave Aranda mentioned it in the press conference. He feels like this is the best defensive line, the best front that Baylor's played this year and will play for the rest of this season. So he's very high on their defensive front. I still think the Utah that Baylor saw at the beginning of the year is the best defensive front that they've faced, but it's nitpicking, right? Houston's done a really good job up front. They have the ability to get sacks. They have the ability to create tackles for loss. They do a really good job against the run. They're right behind West Virginia as far as run defense in the Big 12. Baylor obviously ran for 185 yards or 183 yards against West Virginia. So it does provide, again, a blueprint of Baylor having success here. One thing I will mention on the Baylor side of things. So Houston, they've done a nice job against the run. But the clear thing that teams have done that hasn't worked out for them is when they abandon the run game. So Houston is 3-0 when teams run less than 29 times in a game. So basically the teams that decide they're going to be one-dimensional or have to play behind against Houston really struggle. And that's where, they've had success. That's TCU, Rice, and Utah. Those three teams did not run the football more than 26 times. In those other games, they're 1-6 against teams that have ran the ball 29 or more times. That's just carries. That's just you're going to hand the ball off. You're going to make an effort to run the football. If you do that, you have success against Houston. Obviously, that requires you being able to, which means you have to get first downs and means you have to actually be somewhat efficient running the football. But if Baylor can get to that 30, 31, 32 carry number at minimum, again, you got to feel pretty good because in those situations, Houston's only won one time out of 7 opportunities. So I think that's a big thing that stands out. I will mention one quick thing. Their secondary, it's not the area that's going to be talked about as much because their front is so good, but they have 2 guys that are really awesome in their secondary, specifically their safety, A.J. Halsey. He's one of the best safeties in the Big 12, guy out of Fort Bend Marshall. Baylor looked at him as well during his recruitment, and he's turned into just this awesome playmaker for them in the secondary. They're very, very good. In that regard, they have the playmakers, but I wouldn't say it's consistent throughout their secondary, right? They have a couple guys that are awesome, and then the other guys in their secondary are just okay. I think that will give Baylor opportunities to pick and choose their spots and pick and choose their matchups in the pass game to really attack.
Yeah, they can't hurt you in special teams. So, that's all an area where Baylor's been pretty successful for the most part, and I think that'll be a key in this game as well. Because if you have a pretty good defense and maybe the offense struggles, it's always a tipping point. I feel like they've won games through special teams, just things adding up. So I think that'll be important here to just not take that for granted. And that's a big part, this balanced effort of special teams, offense, defense. It's so cliche, but it's so true that if you play complementary football, you typically win, and more often than not. And they've been doing that lately, and they're on a 4-game win streak. It's not coincidental. They've got all the boxes checked from great coaching going on right now to playmakers going out and winning games for you, to playing well in all 3 phases at various times. Like the defense, not the greatest effort, but they got the stops on downs when the offense wasn't pulling away. And then they get that second stop and the offense then finally pulls away, and then you're off to the races, and it's another win for you. So I do think, that's an area that Houston can hit you, but that's an area you can hit Houston. So, expecting another balanced effort here.
I think one thing I will mention, this is the game for Baylor's defense. Of all the games they've had this year, opportunities to go out there and really dominate, this is the one. You look at their past schedule, Houston is the worst offense they've faced this year besides Air Force and Tarleton, I guess. And Baylor was awesome against both of those two teams. So you go into this one thinking, okay, they're the worst scoring offense in the Big 12. They're the worst passing offense in the Big 12. They're in the bottom 6 in rushing offense. They're the worst third down conversion offense. They're the worst red zone offense. It's very clear that this is set up for a moment for Baylor's defense to maybe put together their first complete performance of the year in Big 12 play. And I think it's a moment they need to. You need to step up at some point. I understand the offense has been great. The expectation is for them to continue being great. But if this defense can come up and have a great performance and maybe hold Houston to, 13 points in this game, I think that could go a long way to providing the confidence for them going into that Kansas game. And then, of course, bowl prep and the bowl game. I think it's a big moment for them.
All right, want to get into the mailbag, but let's spend like a couple minutes on basketball so that we can mention them at least in passing and just give a little bit of an update here. This past week, you had the Baylor women with the pair of wins, 104-55 over East Texas A&M, also 65-42 over Texas A&M Corpus Christi. So they are now 3-1 on the year. Had the sole loss to Oregon, but a pair of wins, and now they will have a continuing little bit of a break. Been off for about a week now, but will have been off for about a week before their next game. Played 2 nights ago. Have another few days of rest until hitting it back this weekend against Southern Miss at home. So that's coming up on Saturday for the women, and then on the men's side of things, winners of 3 straight, had the big win over Arkansas a week and a half ago, and then followed that up with wins last week over Sam Houston, 104-67, and then Tarleton State on Sunday, 104-41. So 3-1 for the Baylor men, 3-1 for the Baylor women, and more in store this week. And for the men, I didn't mention them, St. John's coming up on Thursday. And so that is their big marquee matchup this week. And their only matchup this week is taking on the Red Storm.
Well, and that game is in the Bahamas, so it's going to be you're going to have 2 games, right? So you're going to play St. John's, and then if you win that game or if you lose that game, you're going to play the winner or loser between Virginia and Tennessee.
That's right. Yeah,
Tennessee, a top 10 team. They smoked Louisville. That's basically been their only marquee win. Virginia beat Villanova by double digits, and then St. John's is undefeated. So 3 teams that have not lost this year, and then Baylor, whose lone loss is against Gonzaga. A really good field, a really good opportunity for Baylor to make up for that loss to Gonzaga when it comes to bracketology, your resume, things like that. This is a big weekend for them in the Bahamas and a great opportunity against some good teams. And I personally think we're going to find out a lot about this team, I think, over the next few days.
Yeah, I think we probably will. So I got some tourney action, got big road trip, and should be some good basketball coming your way here over the next few days. But you can get far more in-depth on the basketball side of things with Kendall Cout and Ashley Hodge and everybody else over on Sikkim365.com. But in football season, football takes priority. That's just the way, that's the rule on this podcast. So that's the way it's going to be so long as we roll the way that we roll. But there's a little bit of basketball. We'll have more as the season goes along. But let's get into the mailbag here and see what everybody has to say or ask this week. All right, Alpha Needle, how do you think the 2024 season would have played out if Austin Novosad wouldn't have flipped his commitment? My point with the question is too many of us fans, me included, are too caught up in individual recruiting wins and losses and not looking at overall trends. We all thought losing Novosad was devastating, but it ended up being a blessing. And I was kind of taken aback about the self-awareness there, Alpha Needle, because not everybody thinks about it that way, but that's a nice perspective to have. And I think there was reason to be, emotional and up in arms. That was pretty dastardly. I mean, honestly, it was. To do the signing day flip, I just think it was the relationship that you had. I just thought it was BS to pull that on Sean Bell and company. I really did. I know that happens. I know it's part of the game. I know Baylor, Jarrett Stidham, and, whatever else. I understand that. But doesn't mean that, you can't be wrong and then also say something else is wrong. So everybody's a hypocrite at some point in recruiting. It's just the natural flow of things. But that was BS, and they basically screwed Baylor. I mean, they can say whatever they want to. They did. They threw them up S Creek without a paddle on National Signing Day without a quarterback recruit after having one locked down for months and months and months and months. So anyways, everybody thought it was devastating at the time. It did feel that way, but it's nice now to look back all this time later and have a much different perspective on things and a much different feel around the program. So how would this season have played out if Novosad wouldn't have flipped his commitment?
So a couple things about that time period. Because they didn't land Austin Novosad, they went out and got a guy named Sawyer Robertson out of the transfer portal to be the backup quarterback that year. Now, maybe they take him, but I don't know if they're able to get him if you're promising Novosad, second-string quarterback or whatnot going into the year. So that's a huge part of this. I do think that if this had played out this way, I would kind of bet that either Shapen or another quarterback might have been here, but obviously they went out and got Daquan Finn, so it might have been Daquan Finn starting and then Austin Novosad having to come in and be your starting quarterback if things didn't work out there. I think Baylor would have been markedly worse. I mean, Sawyer Robertson has been so good this year, so if you didn't have him, this season could have really gone sideways. Now, I do have trust in Spavital to make something work offensively. I don't think this would have been, horrific, but I don't think they would have made a bowl game.
No.
Probably. That's kind of where I'm at.
No, that we've seen nothing from the young man out in Eugene as he's kind of sat behind Dylan Gabriel now. And
Finn struggled.
But we've seen nothing from Novosad to think that he would have been like taking the reins and running with it. Nothing from Finn because he's been hurt or whatever for 90% of this season. So it's impossible to look at the situation and go, oh, it could have been better or as good. It looks like it would have definitely been more negative. So you never know how things work out in the long run, Alpha Needle, to your point. And, a lot of stressing and fretting, and it's turned out as best as it possibly could have, better than anybody would have imagined at that point in time. Coach DeBroker with 2 games to go. Which upperclassman do you expect to redshirt?
I'm not necessarily expecting much. There's really not that many options when you look at the upperclassmen, but the 2 in particular that you're looking at really are Jaquez Evans, Kendrick Simpkins maybe if you get medical, Daquan Finn if there's like a medical redshirt that happens there. Those are pretty much the only ones, and I at this moment I'm not sure that Baylor would. Finn, I think if Finn redshirts and plays another year, it won't be at Baylor because I don't think he's going to stay to be a backup. And then you look at Jaquez Evans and Kendrick Simpkins, and you got to look around and say, do we want to keep these guys or do we want to go look in the transfer portal and try to, take another shot on someone else? I think that's going to be something that needs to be answered. But those are really the only options I see who could get a redshirt because of injury.
Yeah, I brought this up last week, just the funny nature of that, and if you could, possibly finagle another year, what does that look like for some of these guys, like a Daquan Finn, was particularly who we were talking about, just as that injury lingers and lingers and lingers, and so, I don't know what his, his options are, but does seem like if he's got another life raft, he's going to take it because he's not an NFL quarterback. So, he would move on, and there'd be no point in sticking around here. That's an obvious one. Jaquez Evans has only played in 3 games. Simpkins has played in 4. That's pretty much it. Dom Richardson's already transferred, and the only other guys are basically walk-ons. DK Kalu's played in 3 games. But he's just a redshirt freshman, so you're not worried about eligibility at this point.
You're not going to get a year back there because he already redshirted.
And he redshirted last year. So, and that's pretty much it.
I guess, one other that maybe we're missing. I don't think Tonga has used his redshirt, and he hasn't played this year. So I think he could be one that maybe falls in line with that.
All right. Thank you, Coach. Bear Sack, will we struggle more with the run or the pass versus UH defense?
I think Baylor's going to be balanced again, so I'm not sure that one is going to be, really, completely shut down. I'll go with the pass, maybe struggling a little bit when you look at the overall numbers. I think Baylor's going to run the football against Houston and find some success in that area, but again, I think they'll be balanced.
Can we sell out to stop the run against their offense? Another talented running quarterback this week. Would you want to dare him to pass?
100%.
after 200 and something yards it felt like from Garrett Green on the ground last week.
Yeah, you're definitely selling out to stop the quarterback pass, and you're going to put your cornerbacks on islands. But guess what? You have Lorando Johnson and Caden Jenkins, and it's one of those moments where you got to be like, hey guys, we need you to step up and win your battles on the outside. And I think that's what Baylor's going to do. I think they're going to make Zion Chris try to beat them through the air consistently, take away the run game, and then let things fall how they may.
Final thing from Bearsack, who on offense will have the biggest game this week, can be wide receiver, tight end, or running back.
Bryson Washington, if I'm given those three.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many options now, which is a nice problem to have, but Bryson Washington feels like he is a pretty safe bet at this stage. So, yeah, I'll run with the hot hand there. But if you said Michael Trigg or you said Hal Presley or Dawson Pendergrass, I mean, they've definitely got some toys now that they have not had in quite a while. Useless Kim Degree, which of the D linemen will play the biggest role stopping Houston and Kansas? Are these games with the front seven has to cause havoc in order for Baylor to win, or is the offense mashed up well enough to keep the game secure the next 2 weeks?
I think Houston is very different than Kansas, right? In kind of how you look at this game. Kansas is going to be about, you're going to have to create tackles for loss. You're going to have to create penetration. You're going to have to get into the backfield. Steve Linton's going to have to play a role getting after Jalen Daniels, making him uncomfortable. I would say against Houston, it's more just being stout up front, not getting moved up front. So, for that reason, I think a guy like Linus Noel is going to have a big game against Houston. I think, you look at Jackie Marshall continuing to play well up front. I think that matters a lot. Trevin as well. He's going to have to step up. Like all these guys, I don't think there's necessarily one, but if you are wanting one guy, then I'll say Linus Noel against Houston and then against Kansas, Steve Linton. I think they're just totally different matchups, right? And kind of what you need from your defensive front. But I do think that, this is going to be very interesting to go from one of the worst offense in the Big 12 to them playing Kansas, who I kind of think is probably a top 5 offense in the Big 12.
All right, about less than 10 minutes to go here. Wyatt Smith, any chance of Bryson Washington get Freshman All-American Award similar to Richard Reese in 22?
I have a hard time thinking he'll get over Sam Leavitt, the quarterback at Arizona State. I think Bryson's been amazing. I think he's going to be up for the award, but Arizona State's 8-2, and that he's a quarterback, and so I kind of feel like that's probably the direction they'd go.
Yeah, if you're going all Big 12, but Freshman All-American, yeah, I think he could definitely be in the mix for that, like Richard Reese was. So, yeah, I definitely think that's possible. I don't know all the other candidates out there, though, off the top of my head, but I would think that very few have put up the numbers that he has. So, yeah, I think that's a strong possibility, but all Big 12's out there for him as well. Mm-hmm. What are your bowl predictions if we went out and go 1-1? Currently, I'm seeing Phoenix versus Wisconsin on December the 26th. I saw Arkansas as an opponent. I'm really honestly not looking at any of that stuff right now. I'm just going to see how they play this weekend, and then with one game to go, you can really narrow it down to what would be what, but I haven't thought much about it.
The most common one that I've seen has been Texas Bowl, which would be against Arkansas or LSU at this very moment. I also think if Baylor wins out, the Alamo Bowl would be in play, but 1-1 I think puts you around that Texas Bowl conversation. If you drop down a level, you might be playing in the Liberty Bowl against another SEC team like Arkansas.
That's why it was important to jump over teams in the standings and now stay above them if you want to get the better bowl draw. Otherwise, you would have been 3 more picks behind West Virginia, Texas Tech, TCU. I don't know how it all would have played out. If you don't win this game, you got to win another one. But that's why jumping in the standings is important because of your bowl order now at this stage. Billy 21, do you think if Kendrick and Jacques redshirt Baylor would keep them for next season or look for better fits? Thanks, Wyatt.
Yeah, I think that's kind of up in the air right now. I think Baylor's playing with their scholarship numbers to see if that's feasible, and then also looking through the portal to see if, maybe they would like to try to upgrade instead. So I think that's the decision process going on right now.
Billy 21, what outside Baylor commits do you see as possible flip to the Bears? And what high school player do you see the probability to commit to Baylor? Thanks, comments appreciated.
I mean, there's a few guys that, we've mentioned a lot. South Oak Cliff offensive lineman, Emeka Ugorji. He's a guy who's definitely on the radar. He's currently committed to Stanford. Zay Gentry, who's committed to SMU, a defensive back, is another one that has been, feels like he's going to end up at Baylor. He'd be the one that feels the most most likely at this moment. Ridgepoint cornerback Bryson Weber, who's committed to Nebraska. I'm curious kind of how that plays out if he ends up on campus for that last game of the year against Kansas. That could make things interesting. And then Dalen Singleton, the 4-star wide receiver who's committed to SMU, is another one who visited recently. Those 4 guys are the main 4 I'm looking at. I think you could see some noise late by Baylor, especially as they're ending this season with so much success. But I will say, with signing day moving up this year to the very beginning of December, we're going to have to see a lot of movement pretty quickly after the season.
Papa Bear says, we do not have a Michael Trigg on next year's team. Do you think the staff sticks to developing Klopfenstein or go after some more athletic bodies that are in the portal that fit the Trigg mold? And Scotty B followed up with, actually, Michael Trigg's a redshirt junior this year, which means he has another year of eligibility if he doesn't go to the NFL draft. So thoughts there on that whole sequence?
So I think Trigg does have another year, so I think he will be back. If he's not back, I think they would add a transfer to go alongside Matthew Klopfenstein. But I think going into next year, Trigg and Klopfenstein, that's a really nice tight end group, I think, for Baylor.
BU grad 21, sure looks like we're milking Finn's injury to save him a year of eligibility. If that's the case, do you think he transfers out or stays another year? It makes no sense, it makes sense for him to transfer, but I wouldn't mind keeping him with such a thin quarterback room and the investment we made into him.
Yeah, no way. I think that if he's going to sit out, I can't see him coming back. He's going to want to go somewhere and be the guy in his final year of eligibility, so I don't see that at all.
Yeah, and I mean, if that's how it works out, I mean, good for him. I mean, going and getting the big payday and then hardly ever even playing this year and then possibly going to get another one, although I don't know that he would command the same thing coming off a year where he barely played and whatever kind of injury he may be suffering from. But, yeah, no chance that he would stay here because there's no guarantee for playing time. I mean, the starter's clear now. There's no more spring battle for the reins. Like that war is over. Sawyer Robertson won that war. So yeah, I think he would move on, and I think Baylor would like to stop probably writing those checks too and direct that money elsewhere. Respectfully. Knoxville Bear, Houston defense is obviously great statistically, but is there anything specifically they do well should have us concerned? I feel like our offense has been humming and has showed it can move the ball multiple different ways. Makes it hard to imagine our offense just getting shut down entirely. What would you expect they throw at us that might be different than the last 4 games, and how do you expect our offense to adjust?
So Houston is just really solid all around, and Baylor hasn't really faced a team over this 4-game stretch that is really good in run defense and really good in pass defense. Now, I wouldn't say outside of that they do anything crazy. They're not forcing a ton of – they do force turnovers, but not at an astronomical rate. They're not getting a ton of sacks, even though they can get pressure. They do pretty well at tackles for loss. But, again, I think it's just how solid they play. They're very cohesive, and they play really hard for their coach. Willie Fritz has them in the right position. He has them playing really hard, and I think – that motor is kind of the biggest thing that makes you worried about Houston, especially if you don't get started fast. I don't think they're going to change too much. My guess is, though, that they're going to try to take away the run game from Baylor and force Sawyer Robertson and these receivers to win more one-on-one matchups. Now, Baylor's had a lot of success in that regard. I think West Virginia kind of tried that at the beginning of last game, and obviously that didn't work out for them. I think Houston has better players. They might have more success in that regard. But again, I think Baylor's going to have their spots. And the way they're operating right now, I don't see Houston keeping up in this game. I really don't.
All right, final thing here. Doc Krell 2014 football team averaged 44.9 points per game offensively against all the P5 teams they played that season. Could you see the 25 Bears getting close to or even surpassing that average if we keep Spavital, Robertson, and Washington, as well as adding some stud wide receivers? I'll just give my 2 cents. The whole transitional property very rarely ever works, in my opinion. I think they've caught lightning in a bottle right now. I think it could bode very, very well for next year. But me personally, I am nowhere close to starting to think about them breaking records next year or much less keeping this all together. I am in this moment because so much of the last 2 years has been crawling through broken glass watching this football team, basically. So I am living in 2024. I know you got to look ahead, but yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, literally everything would have to go perfect. Like,
right.
When you talk about adding receivers, we're not just talking about, oh, you added a couple good players. No, like, you need to be adding guys who are the level of, a Corey Coleman or a Katie Cannon. I don't know that you're going to be able to find that to really match the explosiveness that the 2014 team had. Stora Robertson's great. I think the run game is very good. I think we know that going into next year, but there still are a few too many questions for me to say, oh yeah, that Baylor offense next year is going to average 45 points per game against Power 5 teams. That is a huge number. I think they can be in the upper 30s, though. I feel pretty good about that if they can keep everyone and add some key pieces. But 45 points, that's a lot to predict.
Yeah, I'm not ready to go there. It is time to start looking ahead a little bit, though. I mean, we're getting towards the tail end of the season. You're about to get your recruiting class signed up here and all of that. So it is all building towards next year. I like that there's that optimism, though, that excitement, and the fact that you could even ask that question, Doc. Imagine trying to ask that question like a month ago. You'd have been committed to an insane asylum. And, that's the turnaround they've made. That's what's been so impressive is just the way they've won games, but especially the offense, the way it's humming right now. A lot of credit to Jake Spavital and everybody else, Mason Miller, everybody else, Keenan Hall that's involved on that side of the football. So it's been big time, and looking forward to seeing how it continues. But a nice challenge this weekend against a very stout defense in Houston. But let's get into the prediction here. Thoughts, winner, prediction on Baylor-Houston to close it out.
So, again, I think Baylor's offense is operating at too high of a level at this moment in the season for me to have this fear that they're not going to be able to score 21 points. I think if they score 21 or more points, they're going to win this football game. And so, therefore, I feel pretty good that Baylor's going to find a way to get this done. They're currently an 8.5-point favorite. I think Baylor's going to cover that spread. I think Baylor's ultimately going to win this game somewhere around 30-14 is kind of the way that I look at this game. I think Baylor's just the better football team. Houston will fight hard, play hard, but I think Baylor is truly a top 5 team in the Big 12, and honestly, maybe even higher than that the way they're playing at the moment.
I think Baylor is a better football team overall, and I think that Houston can give them some problems that Baylor would also have to help them to win, to lose this game. Like, I don't think just straight up both playing their best levels that Houston has a path to win this game without Baylor kind of throwing up on themselves or just playing uncharacteristically bad, turning the ball over, doing things like that. That's always possible with teams. You never know, but there's nothing to indicate they're not going to show up this weekend. So if they bring what they brought over the last month, I have very little doubt they should go and win against Houston. So I'm picking them to beat the Cougs and make it 5 in a row and then set up a really interesting matchup to close out the regular season against Kansas. But definitely respect what Willie Fritz has done so far. They're dangerous, but I just think this Baylor team's got the right mindset, and they're playing really well right now. So thanks to everybody for the mailbag questions, everybody for listening, however you do, whenever you do. Grayson, anything before we go here?
Just be sure to check out Sigum 365 Premium, all kinds of content. Basketball's rolling now. We got bowl projections up on the website, lots of recruit notes. Later today, I'm going to have recruiting notes on the commits, talking about how Dave Aranda's return, what that means to them. So be sure to check that out on Sigum 365 Premium.
All right, that's over there. I write a little bit, too. You can find that over there. You can find me in the afternoons on 365 Sports over on the 365 Sports YT YouTube channel, along with Garrett Ross, David Smoak, and Paul Catalina. Besides that, enjoy your week. We will talk to you next Tuesday. Hit that like and subscribe button wherever and however you're listening. And until next time, for Grayson Grundhoefer, I'm Craig Smoak, and this has been the Bearcast on SicEm365.com.